Kyogre is a beast, Lord of the Water and all that. But the question is Kyogre godly enough to make it through Pokémon Emerald, where every battle is a 1v2 and we can only participate in the least battles possible? Well, Kyogre, it's kind of awesome, don't get me wrong, but the odds are extremely stacked against us here. Like, it's not even funny. Now, there's going to be some preamble here because there has to be for this run. If you're not interested, just skip straight ahead to the run. Timestamps are all in the description. So doing a minimum battles run can be difficult enough, but you may look at this and think, yeah, Kyogre should get through. Its stats are awesome, it can learn great moves, but I think you'd be wrong. Let's quickly put to bed a couple of misconceptions. Number one, Kyogre has some awesome base stats. It has insane special attack and defense, 150 and 140 respectively, and its other stats aren't too shabby either. But what's going to kill us is the lack of decent opportunities for EV growth, not to mention Kyogre being in the slow level up group, which is common to most legendary and pseudo-legendary Pokemon. And number two, apart from Watson, are there really any gym leaders that are going to give us any trouble? Absolutely. By being in a 1v2 situation, you're constantly being ganged up on. You're not even given time to set up and are effectively being hit twice each round, but obviously that is obvious. And there are certainly more issues that came up during this run, and if you think the Elite Four should be easy because of Wallace's water typing, you can dispense with that kind of talk right away. But before we get into things, let's quickly go over how this run is possible. There are a number of mods out there that allow dual battles in Pokémon Emerald. One you might have heard of is the Double Edition. Aside from the opinions I have on the game design approach to these types of things, a mod like this messes around with kind of the core features just a little too much to be a viable candidate. There's like different Pokemon, like level growth is different, it's just there. So I spent an inordinate amount of time just trying to find a mod that simply let me have 1v2 battles. Luckily, the Reddit user Aberesque came to my rescue. I've linked the thread in the comments below if you want to try the mod, and they've also got some other mods for games that are worth checking out too. Anyway, once you've got that mod on Emerald, you basically can't make additional changes to the file, and the way I usually add a Pokemon into the game is via the UP randomizer. You can't do that. So in the interest of some semblance of run purity, and because I'm a masochist, I take an untouched Emerald game, I then add in Kyogre, then I just keep resetting at the start until I get a modest Kyogre with some decent IVs. I then find out its stats, which you can do with the save editor. I then copy that Pokemon's stats into the game at the same level as the Mudkip that I chose. Right, let's take a look at Kyogre's moveset. On the surface, it's pretty good. Ancient Power, Calm Mind, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, awesome. We don't get the majority of those moves when we actually need them, but that's life. TM wise, Kyogre gets some heavy hitters, Blizzard, Thunder, Earthquake, but for the latter, I'm staying away from physical moves because Kyogre's special absolutely dwarfs them. Now let me quickly go over the rules, they're also in the description too. Rule number 1 is no items in battle, held items are fine. Rule number 2 is no catching of wild Pokemon unless it's for HM purposes or a trade. Number 3 is no fighting a trainer unless we absolutely have to, i.e. we can't progress the game unless we do so. Number 4 is no save states in battle. Forewarning, I suspend the rule of not saving between the Elite Four because you will see. That's it, those are the rules. Now let's finally get the show on the road. So as mentioned at Game Start, I previously had to start with a Mudkip and just proceeded with minimum battles until Petalburg Woods, where I switched in our Kyogre. What is worth mentioning is that my Kyogre is by no means a perfect Kyogre. While it has good IVs in the stats that matter, even they're not at 31. This will absolutely make a difference going forward, but it seemed purer than just giving it 31 and everything. But for now, when it comes to a gym leader like Roxanne, it's relatively smooth sailing. We're at level 7 and are facing off against her 2 Geodude. For the Geodudes, combined with Drizzle, Water Pulse will always be a one-shot. And while the Geodudes are around 5 levels above us, her nose pass is at level 15. Despite the Golfin levels, we do get a relatively uneventful battle because the nose pass is content to simply use Harden. We're happy to use Water Pulse, even though it's just doing over a half, and the nose pass does have a berry. But all fine so far. Don't worry, that does not last long. Though after defeating Roxanne, you do have the choice to skip Steven and Brawley and head to Slate Point instead, but you're gated by your rival as you progress. First, I thought it was worth tackling Brawley just to see how we match up. The dynamic duo of Machop and Meditite are up first, with Brawley keeping Makuhita in his back pocket. At level 16, his Pokemon are 5 levels above us. I'm conscious of switching between targets when my moves don't one-hit KO, because Meditite has Focus Punch, which will absolutely destroy us. Missing and not being able to reach ranges in battles is something that you just can't afford to do in runs like this, and it's something that only becomes worse over time. But we eventually get through to his Makuhita. However, even though we are doing decent damage, Makuhita is at level 19, meaning its Seismic Toss is pretty devastating, and despite managing to get confused off on Machop, it still gets off Karate Chop and KOs us. I return for a second round of punishment. We use the same strat as before in targeting Machop and still not making the range. However, I'm so focused on Machop and speeding through the battle dialogue that I miss the fact Meditite is lining up Focus Punch, and then it uses that Focus Punch to absolutely destroy Kyogre. So after another unsuccessful attempt, I decide to leave and try my luck against May 2. Because you are able to face Brawley or deal with May in any order, their levels are slightly comparable, plus the mandatory battles we fought on the way have taken us to level 14. Not to mention, May will bring out both Wingull and Slugma first. Even though our Water Pulse is not particularly effective against Wingull, we can still do well over half damage. Slugma, on the other hand, with the effects of Drizzle, will barely do anything to us. But it's neither of these Pokemon we have to worry about, it's the Grovyle. It resists all the moves we currently have and has super effective moves against us. And if you're wondering why it's Grovyle, it's because I picked Mudkip. However, while Slugma can sit there and not do very much, Grovyle's Absorb is pretty devastating. And from when the first one hits, I know that we're not going to be able to win this battle. I try once again, but I know there's nothing we can do for now, so I have no choice but to suck it up and face Brawley again. Now at level 14, our luck fares much better than before. We now one-shot the Machop, and even though Meditite manages to get off a Focus Punch, couldn't really do much about that, we're still standing. When Makuhita comes out, I don't fancy getting another Focus Punch, so focus on the Meditite with Water Pulse. Thankfully, Makuhita uses Bulk Up, and I'm wondering if our Water Pulse will be enough. It's not got great special defense, meaning that it is. Now back to May, and this time we brought Rocks. One serving of Ancient Power is enough to obliterate Wingull, but I'm still not expecting much against Grovyle. Remember, we only just gained 1 level from last time. Grovyle is still faster and uses Pursuit. Then we lag behind with Ancient Power, but we get the boost. Not the first time that'll be saving us. Now, when the turns reset, I use Ancient Power again. Despite the boost, it's not made a world of difference. Grovyle uses Pursuit when it should have absolutely been spamming us with Absorb, but who cares what Slugma's doing either. But Grovyle's use of Pursuit means the battle is over. We use Ancient Power, level up, Slugma tickles us, and then we use Water Pulse. So despite taking the long way around, we have made it to Morville and Watson. We are under-leveled. We are weak to his moves, and he has a lot of Pokemon. The first time in, I was correct in thinking that Voltorb would outspeed us, but it is technically his weakest Pokemon despite them all having Shockwave. Shockwave does far too much damage around 1/4, but our Water Pulse does one-shot the Electrike, which is always good to know. Magneton comes out next. Voltorb uses Rollout, which, while fine, is one of those moves you have to keep an eye on as the damage creeps up. I use Water Pulse on Magneton, and it's pretty effective. However, Magneton then uses Thunder Wave, and I figured I've about lost this one. Despite getting relatively lucky with another Rollout and Magneton's Supersonic missing, we do knock out the Voltorb, but we know what's coming next. We level up to 20, Manectric comes out. I decide to go for Body Slam because we just learn it, but Watson's Pokemon go first with a combo of Quick Attack and Sonic Boom. Then we get paralyzed. Even though we get some health back, we don't last long. Now, while my Watson's Greatest Failures 2023 remix plays out, I was thinking hard about what my actual options are in this fight. For some perspective around Morville, aside from the trainer in Watson's gym, the kid blocking your path, there are only 2 more trainers to fight who are situated just east of Morville. Everything to the west is optional and the north is blocked off. Money's tight. We're getting hardly anything from the few battles we fought, and it's not like we have the HMs to be able to find some of the more lucrative items around the map. I don't have, for instance, enough money to purchase a better TM from the game corner like Ice Beam, and there are no other useful TMs available. Another element that may not have been apparent so far but absolutely dominates the 1v2 strategy is who you choose to focus on first. It's a facet of this run that becomes unbelievably critical as it draws to a close, and we're starting to see inklings of it now. But hey, do I beat Watson or not, right? Well, yeah, but if specific things happen. Firstly, we have to use Ancient Power, and Ancient Power has a 30% chance to give us a boost, and we need that boost to come off on the first or second turn. While we're waiting for this, Voltorb has to use Rollout, and Electrike has to keep using Howl to boost its attack, so we can take as little damage as possible. When that happens, we'll be outspeeding everything. Then we use Water Pulse on the Electrike, and we'll get to the Voltorb. Or, in reality, when Watson sends out Magneton, the Voltorb will get us by using Explosion. It takes off a good chunk of HP, and I'm honestly thinking we're done. We level up to 20, learn Body Slam, and Manectric comes out. I deliberate because while I don't want Magneton's Thunder Wave, I also don't want Manectric to hit me with Shockwave. By using a move that can KO a Pokemon, they'll default to a priority move in most occasions. For us, this is Quick Attack, so I choose to attack Manectric, and it's not a one-shot. Magneton uses Thunder Wave, our Cherry Berry activates, but I know its little magnets are rubbing together in anticipation of another one. We try the same again, and thankfully it had a Citrus Berry. We get another Quick Attack, we knock it out. Magneton hits us with Thunder Wave. Now all we need to do is get one Water Pulse off. Magneton uses Sonic Boom, leaving us at 9 HP, but we don't get paralyzed. As far as difficult battles go, that was easy, and we do get a bit of a break for a while. Maxie isn't too much to write home about. Moves like Intimidate we don't care about. While we are quicker, we're 2 levels below, and our Water Pulse isn't a one-shot. Mightyena and Zubat's combo of Bite and Wing Attack are doing around a quarter of our health. I chose Body Slam, thinking Maxie didn't have a potion, and then I suffer for it, but I managed to knock it out a turn later. But then Zubat crits with Wing Attack, leaving me on 14 HP. Figuring it's over, I use Water Pulse on Camerupt, which knocks it out. The XP from its defeat takes us to level 23, so when Zubat uses Wing Attack, we survive on 3 HP. Then we use Water Pulse and thankfully KO it. Flannery, Fire Water should be pretty simple, right? It relatively is. Flannery starts with her Slugma and Numel. We're at level 23. With Fire's power weakened and us using Water Pulse, their direct attacks aren't a great matchup. Defeating the Numel takes us to level 24. Slugma's Overheat is pointless after Camerupt arrives. Water Pulse on Camerupt is a one-shot. Things are going pretty well. Torkoal comes out. We'll go for another Water Pulse. Why did it do less than half? Why is the sun out? Slugma. Now we're missing our ranges, meaning that Flannery can heal the Torkoal while Body Slam does a fair bit of damage until we eventually faint. So I forgot they pretty much all have Sunny Day. Can't have that go off. Just make sure they don't do that again. We go back in, deal with Numel. I keep using Ancient Power. I can only assume for the boost in the expectation that Slugma or something would use Sunny Day. We'll just forget that one happened. Back at it again. We go for Slugma first. Then when Camerupt comes out, we change our focus to Numel, which we then KO. We switch again to Camerupt, leaving us with only Torkoal. And while Body Slam can do a fair bit of damage, we eventually are able to defeat it with Water Pulse. Now for the wall, aka Father. Norman was such a problem that by the end of it, I was getting daddy issues by osmosis. I don't know whether his setup of the 2 slackings in Ruby Sapphire would have been more difficult, and honestly, I don't want to know. Just look at his team now. Oh yeah, and we're like 5 levels below the slacking. Anyway, they're predominantly physical attackers, and our defense, while decent, isn't on the same level as our special defense. With moves like Slash and Facade, the damage output of his team is stupid. Not only that, while you could manipulate slacking in a 1v1 because of its Truant ability, it isn't really helping you out here, so consider that point moot. Not only that, we can't go anywhere else because we don't have Surf yet, and there are only a couple of rare candies around. Remember, we can't get the one from the Trick House because that would be considered getting into a battle. Let's first look at what happens when we choose to battle Father. The Spinda and Vigoroth are always first. We're at level 26. Vigoroth will always outspeed us and typically use Facade, which takes off just under a quarter of our HP. While our Water Pulse nearly KOs it, it's not quite hitting the mark. In hindsight, maybe a few calciums would have helped us, but money is just still so tight. Spinder then uses Facade, and their combined attacking might leaves us at just over half HP. Norman will then, of course, use a Hyper Potion, taking us back to square one. We use Water Pulse again, and we can see just how close we're getting on that range. Luckily, Vigoroth is still confused and thankfully knocks itself out. In its place arrives Lanoon. We're on 33 HP and we've not even seen the slacking yet. Water Pulse on Lanoon isn't cutting it either. Spin uses Side Wave, which is pathetic, but Lanoon then uses Headbutt and we're down. Not a fantastic first battle, but there's still some experimenting we can do. In the very next battle, to avoid Norman healing Vigoroth, I go for Ancient Power, hoping for a boost I don't get. While we're still taking far too much damage, at least we know the combo of Ancient Power and Water Pulse will knock it out. But the battle then ends much the same way. In another attempt, I give Kyogre an Oranberry to try and claw back some HP. Unfortunately, Citrus Berries are unobtainable at this point in the game. Oh, and we don't get the Mystic Water until the Weather Institute. However, we're only delaying the inevitable, and this strategy ultimately fails at the same hurdle. However, unlike the previous gym, I was able to pick up a couple of rare candies, and now seems like the best time to use them. In doing so, I hope I can mitigate the damage range with Vigoroth, if nothing else. Now, when we use Water Pulse, not only do we outspeed, but it's a one-shot. Lanoon then comes out while Spinder uses Facade. However, there's no way we're catching up to Lanoon's speed, and when it uses Slash, it gets a crit. And while Water Pulse does decent damage, it's now put Lanoon within healing range. Despite Lanoon getting the Hyper Potion and being confused, it gets off Slash and we're done. A few battles later, I get the fantastic news that Water Pulse is a range on the Vigoroth, which is not great. But there's also a new tactic that I'm trying out, but I won't go into that just yet because we've gone back to the Ancient Power and then the Water Pulse model. It worked on the Vigoroth and now it's worked on Lanoon. This means that at 27 HP, this is the first time we're seeing the slacking. At level 31, slacking has no problem outspeeding us and then slapping us into submission. So things aren't looking great, but as a final play, I decide to go back to the Ancient Power well. My hope is that if we can get the boost, we may just be able to claw through this battle with a generous helping of luck. Much like with Watson, if this is going to work, we need the Ancient Power boost to activate as soon as possible. I generally give myself a maximum of 2 turns for this to happen because it's just not viable beyond that. In the very first instance that this happens, you can just see the difference it makes. Slash and Facade are doing much less damage, Vigoroth is easily taken down, so that when Lanoon eventually comes out, we're able to outspeed it and use Water Pulse, which is now a one-shot. This is massive. So when slacking comes out, we now outspeed it and can Water Pulse again, all the while we're not taking too much damage either. However, slacking then gets confused, uses Facade and absolutely spanks us. But now we have a route to victory. Much like before, we now start off with Ancient Power. We get lucky with the first turn boost. Slash and Facade do about a quarter now. We use Water Pulse on Vigoroth, it goes down. Spinder gets a crit with Facade. Our Oranberry heals us a little. Water Pulse one-shots Lanoon. I use Water Pulse again on the slacking. Spinder uses Side Wave, which does nothing. Slacking then uses Counter, which obviously fails, but its Citrus Berry restores it to well over half HP. We use Water Pulse again, leaving it on a sliver of health, but not knocking it out. Slacking is loafing around, and I know the Hyper Potion is coming. However, as long as Spinder doesn't KO us, we can defeat Slacking. So we use 2 Water Pulses on it, and do just that. But we're only at 13 HP. Spinder then uses Side Wave, leaving us on 8 HP. We use 1 more Water Pulse and knock it out. My god, that was something else. Compared to Norman, the next few major battles are a breeze. While it does take us a few tries to defeat Winona, we now have both Calm Mind and Ice Beam. More than anything, Winona is about figuring out which of a Pokemon can do the least amount of damage to you and in which order it's best to deal with them. In a successful battle, Winona starts with her Swablu and Tropius. Because the Tropius has moves like Synthesis, Sunny Day and Solar Beam, we can't have that thing sticking around. However, one hit of Ice Beam will just take it down. And as you can see, our levels are just starting to creep beyond the gym leaders we're facing. Next, we need to focus on Swablu because it has the annoying move Perish Song. However, in anticipation of her other Pokemon, I do set up 1 round of Calm Mind. When Swablu is down, Skarmory is up next. Its Sand Attack can be annoying, but Water Pulse takes it out before that becomes a problem. Altaria definitely can do some damage because of its combo of Dragon Dance and Earthquake, but Ice Beam takes care of that too. Now we can focus our attention on Pelipper. We nearly one-hit KO it with Ice Beam, but then it gets a crit with Aerial Ace, leaving us on 11 HP. I know a potion's coming, and my hope is that this shouldn't matter. I use Ancient Power to eliminate the range, but it crits, and we get the boost. Winona uses another Hyper Potion, but in the end, it doesn't matter because we just use Ice Beam. While Maxie was the bane of my Jirachi Emerald run because of his fire moves and just general annoyance, it's much easier this time around. His first two Pokemon are Mightyena and Crobat. The latter will always outspeed us, and despite being a few levels below his Pokemon, we are able to knock out the Mightyena in just one hit. I let Crobat do its thing and focus on the camera that's just come out. We get crit with Water Pulse, but I doubt it matters. Just Crobat left, I use Ice Beam, but it just manages to hang on. Despite Maxie using a Super Potion, I for some reason went for Ancient Power and I get the boost. Maxie uses another Super Potion, I use Ice Beam, and that's that. Fairly simple. What is usually a formidable pairing, especially in a solo run, Tate and Liza were pretty trivial this time around, thanks to our high special defense. While Xatu outspeeds us and uses Psychic, which does decent damage, Ice Beam can easily one-shot it. Next, I want to focus on Claydol because of its Earthquake, which does a fair bit of damage, and just hope that Solrock doesn't use Sonic Day. Instead, he uses Flamethrower while I use Water Pulse on Lunatone. We level up, Solrock uses Flamethrower again, and we simply use Water Pulse again. First try victory. We can skip over Archie because aside from making sure you take out his Sharpedo quickly, he is not worth talking about. Juan, however, is a decent enough benchmark to see how our encounter with Wallace may go later. After a first failed attempt, I do the smart thing and teach Kyogre Thunderbolt in place of Ancient Power. Now when we face up against Love Disc and Whiscash, I go for Calm Mind in anticipation of Whiscash being annoying. The Love Disc does outspeed us and uses Water Pulse, however. Aside from that, 2 Calm Minds later, I use Ice Beam on Whiscash to knock it out. Because I'm anticipating one of these Water Pulses confusing me, I use Thunderbolt on Love Disc, while Celio uses Water Pulse. When Crawdon arrives, I then switch to Celio. When that's down, Juan's final Pokemon, the Kingdra, is out. It has great special defense, so I know I may not one-shot it with Thunderbolt, so I KO Crawdon first. We level up, then get confused by Water Pulse. By now his team had earned that, and I was right in Thunderbolt, despite our boosts not being a one-shot. While it does paralyze Kingdra, I'm expecting a full restore from Juan, however we get the Hyper Potion instead, and to mitigate the range I use Ice Beam but hit myself in confusion. I go for it again, snapping out of confusion and nearly KO Kingdra, only to get another Hyper Potion. Feeling Juan has none left, I just spam Thunderbolt to victory. We'll skip Wally because he is not worth talking about, because this Elite Four section is going to be something, let me tell you. Having previously done an Emerald solo run with Kyogre, the game was for the most part a joke. For the Elite Four, you set up Calm Mind and you sweep. Not anymore, however. On my very first attempt, I went in at level 46 with Water Pulse, Calm Mind, Thunderbolt and Ice Beam. For Sydney, it'll always be Mightyena and Shiftry first. Mightyena will go down to 1 Water Pulse if you have the Mystic Water equipped. For Shiftry, it's mostly content to spam Double Team. Then when Cacturne comes out, you just use Ice Beam against it. Crawdon likes to use Sword Stance first turn, but then Shiftry confuses Kyogre, as well as then using Torment. Despite that, we can take out the Crawdon, leaving us with Absol. I go for Calm Mind, snapping out of confusion. Shiftry continues with Double Team, while Absol uses Sword Stance. Ice Beam nearly takes out Absol, I should have used Water Pulse. However, we soon defeat it, and then get in a back and forth with the Shiftry until it too is eventually defeated. Now, having gone in at level 45, that's a pretty good result. I'm thinking this Elite Four should be no problem. I generally have moves to counter everything. Maybe we won't even have to use any rare candies. Well, next up is Phoebe, and she starts with a Dusclops and Banette. The former will usually go for Protect first turn, while Banette often uses Grudge. No big deal. I use Ice Beam on Banette, and it's not a one-shot. I expect the heal and target Dusclops. We get the crit, which absolutely mattered. Next, the second Banette comes out, and this one has Thunderbolt. However, we both get attacked by 2 Shadow Balls, taking us down to 26 HP. While we do defeat one Banette, the other attacks us and we're KO'd. So there can be some definite improvements in the strat, but we're looking good at level 45, so I'll just pick up Psychic from nearby Victory Road so we have a decent counter against them. Wait, what's that future me? Kyogre can't learn Psychic? And instead of checking that, you decided to waste time and get it anyway? What an awfully big brain you have. Several minutes of my life gone there, but it makes me think about how we plan to tackle Phoebe. The best teacher is experience, so I think it makes the most sense to simply run through the league. Next time through, Sydney is dealt with much the same. Phoebe, we're not making the range on Burnett, and then Dusclops will then use Curse, and there's no way we're winning that. What I decided to do next time around is, now that Sydney's pretty consistent, we'll use the 4 red candies that we currently have after battling. This, in theory, should mitigate the range on Burnett. Now we're level 48, and when we use Water Pulse on Burnett, it still doesn't KO it. Now, something I want to point out is that I mainly run Gen 4 and above. Something happened after Gen 3 with moves. I'll go into this a little later, but you may think you know of a better move I should be using. As I said, I'll tell you why that wasn't possible. Anyway, the battle with Phoebe fails to progress anywhere positive. We're not making the ranges, and despite whittling her down to our last 2 Pokemon, we're simply not in a good enough position. I tried to use all my rare candies at the start of the Elite Four next time, but that 1 level we gain in between doesn't really affect anything too much. So we've been at this for a while now, and we're honestly in a bit of a pickle. We've not yet progressed beyond Phoebe, so I relented. I pick up a few more red candies so that when we start our run again, we're now at level 53. But will that be enough to defeat Phoebe? The increase in our levels allows Water Pulse to one-shot Burnett now. Then, when the other Burnett shows up, we focus our attention on the Dusclops, whose Protect fails and then goes down in 1. Now at level 54, we get Thunderbolt from Burnett as Sableye comes out. We tank it pretty well, then use Water Pulse on Burnett, which is a one-shot. Sableye, though annoying, can't really do too much, so I focus on the Dusclops. I know it'll be a 2-hit KO, but we should be fine because its Citrus Berry always puts it out of Phoebe's healing range. Finally, Water Pulse is fine for her final Pokemon. And that is our first victory over Phoebe. Next is Glacia. She starts with a Celio and a Glalie. Typically, if you've played Emerald, you expect the Celio to go with Hail first. Obviously, we don't want that because we'll be using Water Pulse against the Glalie because it's more effective. Surprisingly, the two focus more on physical attacks while we set up Calm Mind. Despite getting off some good damage, I use Thunderbolt on Celio, which is one shot. The other Celio comes out, we use another Thunderbolt. The level 52 Glalie is then up. In my first time around, I wasn't using Water Pulse yet, so was using Thunderbolt instead, and as you can see, it's not cutting it. I then use Water Pulse to knock it out, and War Rain is up. For it, we can safely use Thunderbolt again, leaving us with just the Glalie. After leveling up, Glalie uses Ice Beam, we then use Water Pulse, and the battle is over. So it seems like those rare candies did the trick. Drake's up next and we have Ice Beam. Should be no problem, because we know Shelgon loves to spam Protect. We'll have ample time to set up. However, despite them focusing more on physical attacks, I use Ice Beam on Altaria, Shelgon uses Double Edge, which is pretty damaging, and Kingdra then comes out. Like we saw with Juan, I know Thunderbolt won't be enough unless it crits. That did matter. Shelgon uses another Dragon Claw, I use Ice Beam on Shelgon. With Flygon out, followed by Salamence, we luckily get Dragon Breath, which barely tickles us. I then use Ice Beam on Salamence, which is one shot, as well as leveling up. Flygon uses Earthquake, leaving us on just 1 HP, but we've already lined up Ice Beam, which knocks it out. Not bad at all. Maybe I was worried about Wallace for nothing. All I need to do now is just head on through to the room, heal just before I talk to Wallace, and... oh, I'd forgotten about that. Well, if nothing else, those rather unfortunate turn of events can allow me to get some consistency in getting to Wallace, if nothing else. The usual play is to level up using all the rare candies before proceeding with Sydney, then you just save Mighty Enner until last. For Phoebe, it goes Burnett, Dusclops, second Burnett, second Dusclops, then Sableye. For Glacia, you Calm Mind, and then you sweep through a Pokemon. For Drake, one Calm Mind, then you leave the Altaria because it can't do much, to focus on Shelgon, Kingdra, Flygon, Salamence, and then Altaria. Despite this plan, Drake swiftly becomes a pain because of Pokemon like Kingdra and, funnily enough, Shelgon. Because our physical defense is where we're lacking, they can quite consistently whittle us down. However, after maybe 7 more attempts, we actually make it to Wallace. He starts with Wailord and Tentacruel. This is a battle where Kyogre's Drizzle is actually working against us because the majority of his Pokemon have water moves. I set up Calm Mind, Tentacruel uses Hydro Pump, and Wailord uses Water Spout. I then set up another Calm Mind, another Hydro Pump, but Wailord uses Double Edge, which does a fair bit of damage. We're then able to knock Wailord out with Thunderbolt though. Now we have the Ludicolo, and we don't have an effective move against it, but it has a bunch of moves that are effective against us, and Ludicolo outspeeds. For some reason it uses Surf. I use Thunderbolt on Tentacruel, which after 2 Calm Minds knocks it out. Ludicolo then uses Surf again. We outspeed my Lotic and use Thunderbolt, which is one shot. Whiscash then comes out, though Surf doesn't knock it out. Ice Beam doesn't quite KO the Whiscash. We're then KO'd. Back then I thought that wasn't a terrible run, and up to that point I wasn't saving in between the Elite Four. That is something that I end up doing in the end because of how things progress, but we'll get there when we get there. It was around this time, in the back of my mind, I started noticing that something was happening. It began with the moves that Sydney's Mightyena was using. It felt like it was starting to focus more on physical attacks, but despite that I still continued, and even more attempts later, while I would eventually make it to Wallace, I wasn't prepared to keep dealing with the ramp up every time to get KO'd in a few hits. This is where I started using the save state after defeating Drake. If I didn't, I would have lost my mind. But I'll get back to how that may have affected things later. I couldn't afford to do a normal save because if I'd lost, I would have obviously progressed the battle counter and the challenge would have been invalid. It also allows me to roll things back if I need to do other things. Yeah, I could have kept another save state to mitigate that, which was just before the Elite Four, but in the end, it wouldn't have affected the outcome, trust me. In one of my strats, I've replaced Water Pulse with Secret Power. Secret Power takes on different secondary effects depending on your location. In this instance, it does have a chance of paralysing a Pokemon. This could potentially buy us a reprieve. While it does paralyse the Wailord, we spend so much time waiting for the status to take effect that it's ultimately not viable. Another strat I toy with is using Roar. This is because Tentacruel can be extremely annoying with its poison moves. By having another Pokemon on the field that can do less to us, we may be able to get some breathing room. Sometimes I switch between using Roar on it or the Ludicolo, however by doing so we're not actually attacking. Again, another unviable strategy. But by this time I've decided on another strat, in combination with also getting the last 2 rare candies that I can reasonably be bothered getting without entering a battle to do so. Now to do this, as I mentioned before, I just do a normal reset of the game before the Elite Four and do what I need to. However, when I came back to the Elite Four, suddenly I was getting walled by Glacia. No longer were a Pokemon using their moves from before. The Glalie would always start with Light Screen now, and Celio would always start with Hail. This ended up making the battle so much harder than it had been before. To kind of go off on a tangent, look, firstly I'm not a smart guy, but I think we need to talk about RNG for a moment. I assume there are 2 things at play with a trainer battle. Number 1 is a trainer will act intelligently enough in the battle. If they have a super effective move, they'll use it, or they tend to switch into a Pokemon that can use a super effective move. Number 2 is whatever RNG, let's say seed that you're on, in Gen 3, RNG effects are determined by your A input, I think on the start screen. By using a save state, you're basically replicating your RNG and potentially how the battle goes each time. Things can and will change depending on how you act in battle, and from the battles that I had, it was never 100% the exact same play of events like moves, the damage that you would take. RNG is used extensively in things like speedrunning and for catching shinies, but your average player, aka me, has never really delved too deep into that. If you're looking online, specifically at Gen 3, there's really not much info on it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that because of this, I may have made things more difficult, and I am speculating that there is some kind of RNG check happening during these battles that determines AI movesets along with whatever primitive AI they have. Again, I'm most probably wrong about that, but it needed to be said. Anyway, Wallace. We're going with a new strat, Rest plus the Chesto Berry. As you'll see from what's playing in terms of RNG, while Tentacruel is using the same moves, it's not always getting the poison off. The plan here is to be strategic in our rests, while also picking the right time to use Calm Mind, because we can't knock out Tentacruel without it. In the first testing of this strat, we make it all the way to just Wallace's Whiscash, but we just can't do enough to make it across the finish line. And while this is the most effective strategy we've had so far, there's just one thing that's still standing in our way: the damage range of our attacks. You may have been looking at the run so far and said to yourself, why not just buy more powerful attacks, especially Thunder? Well, in Emerald, May is in front of the Lily Cove department store, and she will stay there until you battle her. In a minimum battles run, that is a no-no. Or it was a no-no. The simple fact is, without those moves, and I did the damage calcs, at our level, with our stats, IVs, EVs, this is simply not happening. So, do we just end it there? Or do we take the L and see if it's possible? After maybe 50 more tries, I take that L and I shove May out of the way. Of course, we curb stomp a Pokemon, and we finally have access to the store. What I should note is that before this, I did go and buy Calciums and then try again, but we still weren't making it. Thunderbolt is not viable enough. It does not do enough damage. The only move we really need is Thunder. With Drizzle, Thunder bypasses accuracy checks, and in theory it will mitigate a bunch of ranges. And the thing is, getting the Magnet would require, I think, stealing from a wild Magnemite, or it holds it. So even then, we're breaking the rules anyway, so we can't do that to mitigate that range. But before we see what happens, I need to circle back to what was introduced in Gen 4. You may have already guessed, the physical special split. The short version is that in Gen 3, the move Waterfall is a special attack. In Gen 4, along with a bunch of other moves, it was changed to a physical attack. And because I play so much Gen 4 and above, I still thought that it was a physical move. However, the point is moot, because if we were to have taught Kyogre the move to deal with Glacia, we can't defeat Wallace because we couldn't delete the move to replace it with Rest. Right, enough chatter, enough defeats, let's see how we win. We start the battle at level 59 after picking up the final rare candy I can and strategically saving it to just before Wallace. We have Rest, Thunder, Calm Mind and Ice Beam. We start by using Thunder on Tentacruel because we don't want the poison. It's a one-shot. Ludicolo comes out. Wailord uses Double Edge. Ludicolo still outspeeds and uses Double Team. We use Thunder on Wailord. Another one-shot. Now we're facing both of Wallace's most dangerous and annoying Pokemon together. Despite Ludicolo's multiple double teams, Thunder hits because, in rain, it bypasses accuracy checks. Not only that, it does just enough damage to not put Ludicolo in healing range. While Whiscash unknowingly uses Amnesia, Ludicolo uses another double team, and we use Thunder. Gyarados then comes out. Whiscash uses Amnesia again. I deliberate about using Calm Mind, but ultimately choose Thunder on Gyarados. It's another one-shot. Wallace then sends out Milotic. Whiscash uses Earthquake, which we tank pretty well. Because I was confident Milotic can't do much, I now use Calm Mind. I'm thinking about my Ice Beam uses on Whiscash. Milotic then wastes its turn using Recover. I then deliberate again before using Calm Mind because we still have Rest in our back pocket. We then get hit with Toxic and some decent damage from Whiscash. I have no choice but to use Rest next turn. We get a combo of Surf and Hyper Beam. I choose to use Ice Beam on Whiscash to get the Clutch Freeze, but it's not doing too much damage. Milotic poisons us again. I should have just done that the other turn. Anyway, we just have Whiscash now. I use Ice Beam, it uses Hyper Beam, Poison takes us down to 25 HP, I have to heal. We sleep for 2 turns while I wait for Ice Beam. It hits, taking Whiscash down to maybe be in range of a KO in our next attack. To negate any chance of missing the range though, I use Calm Mind while Whiscash recharges. Feeling cautious, half expecting a heal, I use Rest. Whiscash uses Surf. 3 turns of Rest later and we finally wake up. We use Ice Beam. Whiscash and Wallace are defeated. Like I said before, that was something else, and it's probably the hardest challenge I've done so far. But technically, even though the credits rolled, you could say we just have one more challenge left. Steven. Now, the video is long enough, so I'll just give the cliff notes on Steven before we lay the smackdown. Steven's Pokemon are around 15 levels above us. However, we do have a bit of an advantage in our moves. Battling Steven was a process of trial and error, make no mistake there. The long and short of it is that instead of Thunder, you need Waterfall. Remember the physical special split I was talking about? Now you have to approach this battle very specifically. It's only possible after getting off 2 Calm Minds, and you have to time that precisely. We start the battle with Skarmory and Claydol. We intend to keep the former alive throughout the battle. Though it has Toxic, it never seemed to use it, and its moves are the least damaging out of all of Steven's Pokemon. We start the battle with Calm Mind. If Claydol uses Ancient Power and gets the boost, we reset. We then use another Calm Mind. Skarmory uses Steel Wing, and Claydol uses Ancient Power again. We're at 79 HP, but in theory, we can still tank a few hits from Skarmory only. Waterfall hits Claydol, Aerial Ace takes us down to 33 HP. We can't rest now, because Aggron has Thunder. When we use Waterfall on Aggron, we just have to hope Skarmory doesn't KO us. Its Steel Wing takes us to 7 HP. I use Rest even though I know Credilli will probably use Giga Drain. We get Steel Wing Mist and then Ancient Power, however. We then use Ice Beam on Credilli. Armaldo is out next. We use Waterfall. It's one shot. Along with leveling up Steven's most powerful Pokemon, the Metagross comes out. This is why we needed those 2 Calm Minds. Nothing less will KO the Metagross. It then goes down, and we're at 50 HP during the final round. One more Waterfall, and the battle's ours. Hey, that is it, we are done, and that run was definitely something else. While I'm disappointed that we had to fight May in order to get the moves we needed, I'm not sure, even with the greatest IVs, we still wouldn't have faced the same hurdle. Despite the difficulties, it was definitely an enjoyable run. I honestly think in Emerald, Kyogre is the only viable Pokemon to complete the run, if we're only talking about Pokemon that were introduced in Gen 3. As I said at the beginning, you should check out the mod for yourself, as it's really fun. The way you need to approach each battle ends up being so much different, it really refreshes the game. Oh yeah, and we did all that with 87 battles fought. But maybe you'd have a better plan to deal with some of those battles, feel free to let me know. And I've also included a list of all the trainers I fought and their locations in the description if you're interested. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know. And if you want to like or subscribe, go for it. Until the next time, have a good one.